had to fight and advocate to be at the table. It wasn't yeah, Amanda, come join us. And I had to advocate and fight. And there were moments during that work where nobody came out and said this to me, but I could tell by maybe not being invited to certain things or not being at the table for certain things or have the ability to decide certain things, then maybe some folks didn't recognize my leadership in that space.
Even as a co-lead, you had that challenge?
Even as a co-lead, even as having Hennepin County like behind me, right? Saying that I'm the representative in this space, even then.
Welcome to the Career Safari podcast, a space for us to get inspiration to walk boldly on our own path, where we have candid conversations with women from around the world about their unique career journey, because there are women everywhere carrying the torch for us. And I'm your host, Wamita. And if you didn't know by now, but I suspect you do know if you've been following us all seasons, there have been changes. You're still able to listen to our torchbearer stories every month and get that shot of inspiration that you need. We are also now on YouTube. You can watch our full-length interviews on our YouTube channel, Career Safari. So come subscribe to our channel, join our chats. We read your comments. You give us inspiration as well. And I'm so excited, and we're so excited to bring this to you every month. But now it's a new month and a new torchbearer is here. I am thrilled to have this conversation. We've been pre-gaming and chatting.
Yes,
and there's so many things I'm ready to get into. And once you hear about her, you'll know why. She's a Guyanese American background. And for many years, she was a public servant in Hennepin County. And if you're thinking, where is that? That is a county where Minneapolis, Minnesota is located, in a place that has become the epicenter of the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's because that's where also George Floyd was murdered. And as a public servant, she led the statewide Super Bowl LII anti-sex trafficking committee. She has also co-led several projects on public safety and policing. She is also the co-founder of In Sisterhood We Brunch. And now she works with several clients on public relations campaigns. With many prestigious accolades behind her name, I'm so ready and so happy to have this conversation with Amanda Koonjbeharry. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Can you come with me and do that intro everywhere, girl? Because
I can actually do it better. I might have to record that. But like, yeah, when I started looking at like your history and what you've done, I'm like, why God have you chosen her to be in the middle of so
Oh my gosh, I love it. I thought it was great. So thank you.
No, I'm so happy to celebrate you. And the name of your career safari is The Journey Back to Me. And Amanda, as soon as someone mentioned interviewing you, I knew I wanted to have this conversation. But then as we started talking, I was like, oh, damn, there is a lot to discuss here, even more so than what I saw in the original profile. So
thank you.
I mean, let's start here. I've been to Minneapolis, which is also known as the Twin Cities, once, years ago. Okay. And it was cold, it was icy and snowy. So I was super surprised to see so many East Africans there.
I know, right?
I'm like, what are my people doing here? I mean, but now I talk to a lot of people there and I understand why so many have immigrated there. But how did you end up in Minneapolis?
Yeah, good question. Similar journey, really. So my family is from Guyana, South America. A little bit of a history lesson for folks who may not be as familiar. So my ancestors are from India, and the British had colonized India, and they created an indentured labor system, and they ended up bringing folks from India to different parts of the West Indies. Guyana in particular, they had abolished slavery, but they still were seeking cheap labor. And so that's where They ended up bringing folks from India to Guyana. So I bring that all up to say, because when people hear that we're from Guyana, South America, it's just culturally, they're not sure. So we're Caribbean, West Indian, and it is also not in our blood to be in cold climates. So I ask my family that all the time, but I think like the kind of a immigrant story really that is similar to a lot of immigrants, where my family, my mom's side of the family in particular, her uncle, I think he had an opportunity to go to the States to go to school in Wisconsin, but I don't think any of us knew where Wisconsin was, right? So Minnesota was the next closest thing. And he ended up coming here. And then he was able to bring and sponsor over a lot of my family. So that's how we landed in Minnesota. But you'll find big pockets of like Guyanese folks in New York, in Florida, in Canada. So we're there and we're representing. So that's how we made it.
So that's a little bit similar for Kenya. There was a lot of South Indian indentured servants that came as well.
Yep.
Oh, the British.
I know. How much time do we have though? Because
No. So if you don't want to travel with me and we go to some of the former colonized nations, because then I see things and I say things to the tour guide and they like they don't like me.
They're like, how do we respond to this?
I know. And I'm like, this is what was stolen. And
no,
that's
I
real.
agree
I'm not the one to go on those trips.
We should travel together. That sounds fun.
To just destroy the narrative that they're putting out there.
Yes, I'm all about that.
So thanks for that history. Yeah, that is a lot of immigrant story. Like you have the opportunity to come to the United States for education. And then once like one person kicks down the door, you bring others.
Everybody.
And I mean, that's why that's the beauty I feel of being an American in the American story. There's so many people. We get the best of so many nations and we created this country. So, I feel you there. But speaking of this nation, when did your desire to become a public servant start?
Oh, good question. And I feel like this is non-traditional. I was young. So, everybody goes through experiences in life, right? Traumatic, or just tough difficulties. And I think for me, there were moments in my life where experiencing, some of that difficult times and moments where I think empathy was really elicited from me, and just experiencing that for myself or witnessing family kind of experience that too was really the motivating factor and the driver for me wanting to serve community. I think at a really young age, I had just moments of transformation because of my experiences where I knew deep kind of in my heart, and I was around like 13 when I think I had some of these moments where like I want to lessen the suffering in the world, whatever I can do. I don't want to add to it. I want to figure out how can I help people not experience some of these things. And then as a young woman, right, going through my own experiences, again, same thing. It's like anything that I'm learning, I want to be able to share that. Anything I'm experiencing, like if I can be, kind of like a torchbearer, like what this is about, right? Like
what you are.
Yeah, what I am. Thank you. And what you are, right? Like, how do we hold the torch up to say, hey, you know what? There's an alternative path, or there's a way that you don't have to experience this. And if you do, you know what? There's a community of people here that are going to hold you and love you and see you, and the beauty that you bring to the world. And so that is why I decided, like, I want to serve. And I think I'm serving in different ways.
Yeah, you are. And something tells me you will always serve. But it didn't have to be through the government. So why did you feel the government was the best? Sorry. It didn't have to be.
I feel okay. I see it.
It didn't have to be. No, I mean, obviously I would like to hear why you chose for that to be like the way you serve.
How do you feel about the government?
We're being recorded.
I know.
No.
No, it's a
I'm a
unique
card
path.
carrying Democrat. I vote. I believe. I mean, in back of my mind, I think I might run for like local government one day if I have the
Oh my
energy to
gosh,
be
call
scrutinized.
me.
I will.
Yes,
So I
I
believe,
will be
especially at a
there.
local level. I mean,
Yes.
I love it at a local level. It's where we get the most impact. We see the most impact in our lives when we pay attention to who we're electing. We have, I mean, if you are actually very active in your local government, you can change some things. Like you
Oh
can
my
really like
gosh.
change school
Yes.
systems, where the budget's going. So do I believe in government? Yes. Now it gets
Yes.
a little funky.
Yeah, it does. Definitely. We can talk for days. I know we only have an hour, but I think to your question though, exactly what you just said, right? Like I think so. I had started my career in nonprofit, and that was great. The experiences there, I started out social work. I got connected and got involved in things at the legislature, really saw the power that policy had on people's lives directly. And that was what kind of sparked that flame for me, that I want to be able to advocate not just one to one with somebody, but really think about the systems that we're operating within and how they govern our lives and how we can really make those beneficial. um, but I think one thing that, being at Hennepin County, I was there for like 6 years, a little over 6 years, which to me that was like a good chunk of my life.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, and I saw like local government, like you just said, is so powerful. It has the ability to be incredibly impactful in your life. And I think that's what, like, I do get really passionate and kind of nerd out about electoral politics in that way. Like, federal government, like, also very powerful, very important to pay attention to what is happening there. But I think we forget that local government, school board, county commissioner, city council, right? Like, there is a huge budget that a lot of these folks are managing,
Yep.
or really important decisions that they're making that are going to have a direct impact on our lives. And so for me, getting into Hennepin County, I had no idea like the level of resource that was available at the county level, and the direct impact that the county was having on people's lives, whether it's through the criminal justice system, child protection, providing mental health services, or financial support services. Like, they are really orchestrating so many of these things. And I think, oftentimes we're just not aware. And so for me, really thinking about like, how can we serve our community the best? How can we do better by our communities as a government entity? That really kind of fueled my passion.
Yeah.
And brought me there.
Thank you for explaining that more. You did it a lot better than I could ever.
Oh my gosh. I was playing off of what you said. I thought it was great.
But
Yeah.
I know you're not doing that work anymore, but would you go back?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think I'll be real, right? Because folks who are listening to this podcast, like, maybe are in government or thinking about government. Um, as a woman of color, and I'll just speak to my experience as a woman of color in government in Minnesota, and I found myself in a leadership role at a pretty young age. Um, it was hard. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat that. Like, it is hard. Government systems do take a time to change, right? And they've been around for such a long time. I think the impact of change can be profound and have really amazing benefits to community. But for me as an individual, it was really tough because I felt like I wasn't just, being in a leadership role there and working on the issue I was working on, right? Anti-sex trafficking, that alone was like such a heavy topic and issue to work on. But then I felt like I was carrying the torch for so many of our communities, right? Our BIPOC communities. And like, that was what was so heavy for me. Like, I could feel it. I'm all about, our bodies are speaking to us all the time, right? Yeah. I could feel it in my body, the weight of that unspoken pressure that I felt. Whether or not anybody put it on me, the system itself, I think, put it on me, right? And I think so many of us feel that. So just know what you're walking into as much as you can, and make sure you put supports around you if you are going to choose to do that work. It can be really rewarding, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to go there this episode. So are you ready?
Hello, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm here.
You have been in the middle of some very complicated and significant moments, and I want to talk about them. Mm-hmm. And I want to start with the Super Bowl and the anti-sex trafficking role. So the Super Bowl, Koonjbeharry has a global audience. I'm assuming most people know what the Super Bowl is, but let me explain it. The Super Bowl is one of the largest sporting events in the world. I think the World Cup beats it. However, over the years, the Super Bowl has also been known as one of the largest human trafficking and modern day slavery events in the United States. And you led the statewide Super Bowl anti-trafficking campaign when the Super Bowl was in the Twin Cities.
I did.
I mean, like, good gracious. Yeah. I had to pause there. Like, you led that.
I was like, is it a question?
No, that was a pause of like, people understanding what the heck, like, good gracious. How were you selected for that? And can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, definitely. If I can, I will say, because I would be remiss after doing that work if I didn't say this. So I think a few things we learned in that work was Super Bowl is huge. It's massive. I think one of the biggest things we learned, though, was that we don't know if it's the largest sex trafficking event in the world, right? But kind of going off of like supply and demand, it's anytime you have a large event in your city, there's going to be an increased risk of exploitation. So just wanted to put that out there for folks too, to just kind of think about, be aware about.
Okay.
And then I will say I have to give credit. So I co-led it. I co-led it with two other amazing people. But I think, just as we think about, kind of who's listening and the way that we were able as Hennepin County to kind of help support that work, it was myself and some of the folks at Hennepin County. Like I remember I had a meeting with the Super Bowl host committee. So there's going to be a host committee that's in the state that is looking to get this bid. And there's a lot of work that they do to kind of position their city to host this incredibly global event. And so Minnesota had won. And I ended up having a conversation with one of the folks who was a part of the decision of who's going to kind of help lead this work for the state. And so myself and the two other co-leads, we ended up kind of coming together. And to me, it just made sense. Like this was happening in Hennepin County. Hennepin County and Hennepin County's board had really committed resources, had built out this plan to really address this issue within the county. And just kind of the combination of those two things, I think really positioned us at that time to be a leader in that space and really help bring together different folks in the community. But I think the real power was the people on the ground who were doing the work. So they were the ones that really carried the torch for this work, right? And like executed it. And I am just forever grateful for them because they are the heart of it. But that's kind of how we navigated through that. And it was intense. I'm happy to talk and answer anything about it.
Please talk about the level of intensity. And I want to also say this is about celebrating you. So do not shy away from talking your shit.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, girl. Yeah.
This is about like it. I mean, I know there's graciousness in how you're talking about it. There's obviously, when you're doing this level of work, there is so many people that are involved that are pitching. You have your co-leads and you mentioned them, but use your I statements. Talk you come on, lady.
Thank you. And I know, right? You're right. Yeah, damn it. I did.
Yes.
And I think that's actually, I appreciate you because that's such an important thing, especially for women of color. We don't own our greatness, right? And what we bring to the table. So I appreciate you holding me to that, to my greatness. So thank you. girl, where do I start? Like that.
So what did you,
Yeah.
what does an anti-sex trafficking committee do?
Yeah, so we ended up really thinking about and putting together a plan for how do you, when you're having like thousands of people come to your community and you know there's a heightened level of risk, how do you prepare for that? How do you put things into place to prevent that? So we really worked with, I mean, the coalition we put together ended up having over 100 people that were involved at the
Wow.
end of the day. There were a lot of earned media campaigns. There were some launched campaigns like trying to tell narratives, right? Trying to debunk myths, trying to talk about this issue. So using it as a platform to educate and to bring awareness, but also to prevent and to bring resources to do that. So you have to think about the actual week of, right? And what's happening and who are some of the folks that, may not have a place to stay. How can you make sure you're providing shelter, food, access to resources they may need, and who's going to deliver that? Then thinking about like on the, then you have like the police thinking about like how do they make sure that they're stopping anybody who may be exploiting somebody, right? How do they find them and prevent that before that can happen? And then thinking about if there is a young person that enters into any system or goes to a hospital or whatever it is, how do we support them? How do we do that in a trauma-informed way? And how do we, again, make sure we're not contributing to any harm that or any trauma that they've already experienced? So super like multi-pronged in that way. I think, what I learned from that experience though was that I think is important and that can transcend any issue that you're working on. I still consider myself a young person and a young woman, and I was even younger. Like this was a few years ago that we did this work. I had to fight and advocate to be at the table. It wasn't yeah, Amanda, come join us. And I had to advocate and fight. And there were moments during that work where nobody came out and said this to me, but I could tell by maybe not being invited to certain things or not being at the table for certain things or have the ability to decide certain things, then maybe some folks didn't recognize my leadership in that space.
Even
And
as
I
a
think
co-lead, you had that
even
challenge?
as a co-lead, even as having Hennepin County like behind me, right? Saying that I'm the representative in this space, even then. And I think that it's so important to bring up because again, to who we're talking to, right? Like to you, whoever is listening right now, and especially if you do identify as a young person or as a woman of color, like I had to know who I was. Like I had to know what I brought to the table. I had to know what I was capable of, right? And I had to know that like I bring value, I bring perspective, and I bring relationships to this. I may not have years of experience like some people. I may not have all the political leverage in the world, but I know who does, and I know how to communicate with them, right? And I know how to leverage this other person's resources. And so that was important for me mentally to know, like, even though I felt like I was being, again, not recognized or acknowledged for what I bring to the table, I had to remember who I was. Again, like that journey back to me, right? And that is a theme that continues to like play itself out in my career. And again, like being so solid and grounded and remembering like who am I? How do I show up in this space? So that was actually a really big challenge personally doing that work. Because we had done that work almost 2 years before the actual Super Bowl. So um, there were moments of just like remembering my voice, remembering my power, and bringing that back and making sure I fought to have a seat at that table.
So what did you actually like do to remember who you were and to like heal from that and move forward?
Yeah, I gotta say, and this is where, like, again, if you're gonna go into government or you're gonna go into a job or a career, space where you know you're going to run into some barriers or it's going to be hard, prepare yourself with people. So make sure you are like, you have an amazing group of people that you trust, that love you, that admire you, but that know who the F you are, right?
Yeah.
Like, who know your greatness, like how you just reminded me, right? Like, own it, Amanda, own your shit. Like, I had to have people professionally, right? Like, I had some amazing people at that job, at that county, that really like lifted me up. They saw my potential even before I did. And they encouraged it, they nurtured it, they reminded me who I was, right? When I had moments that I forgot. And then even more important, like, I had people outside of those walls that knew me before then, that know me to my core, right? Like, really see me for my authentic self. And those are the folks that, like, I can call them anytime and be like, hey, I'm forgetting who I am, right? Like, I'm feeling some type of way about this. And they're going to hold me accountable to greatness, to that version of me that they know that I can be, right? And so, when I'm messing up and when I'm doing something crazy, they're going to also call me out on it, right? Those are the folks that are going to have your back, not the ones that are just going to be like, oh, you're great, blah, 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 blah. No, they're going to be like, Amanda, what was that? Like, what, right? But like, I love you enough and I care about you and I know your potential. Like, let's work on this together.
Shout out to that support system and all of our support systems. Like, seriously.
Yes. Right.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I started Career Safari, but it's, these jobs can be so traumatic. What it puts you through, it, especially as a woman, as a person of a different ethnicity, whatever the major population is in your particular country, but it can really have you doubting who you are. Like, you walk into a job with the best intentions, ready to show up authentically, and then boom, boom, boom.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Like, it's just snap. It just got real.
No, you're like, what just happened to me?
But you need those moments, you need those people, and whatever it is, to call upon yourself to, like, I can do this. So I'm so happy you had that support system by you, and I know I can tell you do that for other people as well.
Thank you. I try. I mean, I think that's why I know the benefit of it. And so I want to be able to provide that, like, we're always handing it forward, backward, sideways. Like, you just bring everybody, right? Like, this is about sharing. So, yeah.
Well, if that wasn't enough, in 2019, you became the director of public policy at Citizen League, which encourages individuals to engage more with the government, hence why she spoke so eloquently about and passionately about being involved in her local government. This was part of her job.
Yeah.
But little did you know, when you took that role less than a year later, we as a nation and as a country, as a global society, would be embarking on the largest movement ever in the United States history, Black Lives Matter. And that your city would ignite that revolution in the worst way possible, the murder of George Floyd. You don't have to answer, but I just want to be clear as we're entering into this conversation. Did you know anybody involved? And you don't have to say who.
I didn't know any of the folks involved. I had seen George, though. I knew he worked at a place that has like salsa dancing and bachata and stuff. So I had seen him there before. But that moment was just like, I don't think I'll ever forget, and for me, being in a brown body too, like, growing up in Minnesota, it's just a different experience. And my heart, and unfortunately, like, this wasn't the first experience we've had in Minnesota with an officer involved or related, shooting. And so, or murder. And it was just, I don't even know like how to put it into words, but I remember where I was at like organizationally at that moment and what we were going through as an organization. And I think just like inside of me, I was like, I can't even work right now. Like I need to be with community. I can't sit in front of this damn computer and function like at all. And that's happened before. And it's like, because I just can't get over like, and I'm not saying they expected this at all. Like I think my organization like really recognized that and leaned hard into that and into like people's humanity, right? Like that you can't be expected to function in this moment. So I'm really grateful for that. But recognizing it's just like a moment in history where you realize like how interconnected we are, right? And how we have to stand up and like for true justice, we have to know our interconnection to each other and show up and speak out and like stand up against things that are stand up to injustice, really. So for me, I think just being in community in that moment was absolutely essential.
So before stepping into that role, did you know how tense race relations were in your community? And was that a priority for your work going into this position? Or that position?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, so if folks are not familiar with Minnesota, Minnesota is a beautiful, beautiful state. But Minnesota has some of the worst racial disparities in the nation. And that is like something that we have to reckon with as a state. And I think that people have been trying to for a long time, but it's so insidious, it's so embedded, I think, and it continues to play out. Um, a lot of my passion for the work that I've done, and to the first question you asked, a lot of my trauma has been racial trauma, and other forms, unfortunately, but like there's a significant amount of racial trauma that I, as a brown person, have experienced. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. I was one of like before high school, I was one of like five um, non-white folks. And then in high school, it was maybe like 10 of us. So I gravitated towards my pockets of
A whole
communities.
10.
Yeah, like a whole 10 and like maybe 11, maybe 12, give or take, a few of
We
us.
don't know exactly what you are, but you might be one. 10 in a possible. 10 in a
10 in a possibilities. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but it was just so, I mean, it was just crazy. Like like a lot of folks who maybe didn't see a lot of people that looked like them growing up can remember the first time they realized they were different. And then, you talk about media, you talk about images, like the only people I would see who were like me were my cousins on the weekends, right? But I mean, it was literally, and then the racism, like there was blatant racism that I experienced in that school, that I witnessed in that school. I say this story too, and like kids would have Confederate flags, like I remember on their shirts or hats, but on their tailgates, on their pickup trucks outside in the parking lot.
You still see
And
it.
you still see it. And it's like, gosh, we're in the Midwest. Like this is Minnesota. Like that doesn't make sense. Like, why do you have this? This is crazy. But
You were not a part of the Confederacy. Like,
yeah, literally, why do you know your geography and history right now? Like this that literally doesn't make any kind of legitimate sense. But it was crazy. And like it did something to me in like my psyche, right? Like a lot of experiences of racial trauma. It does something to, there's so much work you have to do to unlearn that internalized racism and for me as a young girl, right? Like images of beauty and standards of beauty. And again, you look at media, you look at what you see outside of school, and it wasn't me, right? So I say all that to say that racial justice has been a core value of mine because of my own experiences. And I think after just kind of in my early 20s is really when I started to be fueled, like, and really like recognize like injustice around me, I can't be silent. So entering into I think all of my jobs, that has been front and center, but especially like during my time at Hennepin County and then at Citizens League as the director of public policy, absolutely 100%. Like that is the lens that I operate through. Is through racial equity lens. And I'm learning and I'm doing my best. And so I just continue to be in a learner mindset because I am learning, right? And like, but I do my best to bring that lens and to question things or to, provide that perspective whenever I can. So
as a professional, how did you even begin? I mean, not just a professional, but a professional in that role as director of public policy at an organization that's supposed to be advocating for more citizen involvement. You got it. So, and like I said, in the worst way possible. But as a professional, how do you even begin to approach this type of situation?
Yeah, good question. For me, I think first and foremost, I have to know my limits always. And I think you and I were talking about this, right? Like, what are our boundaries? And maybe we didn't use those words, but know your boundaries.
Yeah.
So know, like, okay, we're passionate about this work because it's been fundamental a lot of times to our existence and our survival, right? So it hasn't even been a choice at times. But having boundaries and having clear expectations around how you want to navigate that space. And so what I mean by that is like, for me in that moment, in that job, as one of the few people of color in that organization, it was important to me to use my voice and to think about ways that I can apply pressure and push for change. My leadership actually came to me after George Floyd was murdered and was asking questions like, how can we talk about this at our board? What can we do? And so that's where I really was like, well, you need to talk about this. Here are some ways to frame it. And again, I think you have to decide, do you have the energy to even do that? If not, they can hire somebody to do that, right? Like they can put resources and bring in folks who are willing and ready and able to do it. So really knowing like what is your racial trauma and what's the healing work you've done, and do you have capacity to even hold that space and do that work? And for me, I felt like, you know what? Yes, this is an insanely critical moment in time. And I want to be able to help change the direction of this work and what we're doing in this organization. But then recognize my own limits and really pushed for us to bring in experts and consultants to do deeper work with us fundamentally as an organization, and not just on the individual, but the organizational level. So we were able to bring that in and do that. And even after I left, they had continued that work. So that's kind of how I applied pressure, during that moment.
I remember, I mean, I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area, but at least with my colleagues where I was working at the time and a lot of my friends in the professional world, we felt this overwhelming obligation to strike, like while the iron's hot. Like we knew that there was this window to make real change happen in our jobs in corporate America, in the school system, wherever you sat. And we just like went for it. And I'm still exhausted from it. I'm still exhausted. And the conversation Amanda and I were having before we started recording was just, as she mentioned, again, we didn't use the word boundaries, but that's what we're talking about. Like, I don't know if I have the capacity to ever, like at this point, give that. I wouldn't say ever, maybe in a few years I would, but it was really important. You feel this obligation to move, and you know that, the powers that be were open to it. And so you're like, we have to devote ourselves to, I felt compelled, and it sounds like you and a lot of other people felt compelled to make something happen in their companies and in their industries. At the same time, and I'm just curious, I've also noticed that there's been backlash for people who stood up and said yes, that said, yes, I will lead your D&I committee. Yes, I will help us figure out how to deal with, race relations and social justice. And I've seen, some of my friends step up to those moments because they were asked to, but then when the window started closing, there was backlash. Have you seen that?
I have. And I think you're hitting on so many important pieces right now. Like, in the policy world, we call it like the policy window, right?
Mhm.
Exactly what you're talking about. Where is the moment to be most effective? And you're right. It is fading. Like I've seen so many articles being written about this kind of fading, or like the money that corporations have committed to DEI work, and like, where's the impact? And maybe it's not even being committed, right? Like maybe it's just been said.
Yeah.
So I think again, it's like that. It's tough. I had a mentor in a previous job once tell me, like, sometimes it's hard to be effective in a role that explicitly says diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
That sometimes you can be more effective when you bring that lens to everything you're doing, whether or not you have the title. So, and again, I'm sure people will disagree with that. That's cool. It's just one perspective. I've appreciated that perspective, because I think what I've seen in terms of backlash is that people get pigeonholed in those roles, and there's not an ability, there's no resourcing, there's no support for the person. And then I don't know how seriously they're taken in an organization.
Mhm.
And so the effectiveness might not be there, right? And so I think about it like, how can I bring this lens to everything that I do instead? And yeah, and if you are getting backlash, like, again, finding the people that can like push back on that too. And I'm not sure, I guess I'm curious too, like how you see this moment. Like, how do we bring that window back, right? Like I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, how do we push for accountability, right? How do we push so that the window doesn't close and then it's lost, right? Like, how do we, or is it us? Is it somebody else that needs to do it? But how do we keep this going? Because we can't revert back. Like, we got to keep moving forward. And I'm committed to that. Like, that's where I'm like, I'm committed to that. So how can I put my energy into that? And I'm not sure what that looks like exactly, but I'm curious. Yeah. What have you been thinking about?
I mean, the good thing is people didn't make promises not too long ago.
Yep.
So
That's right.
a lot of the same leaders that said, I'm going to commit money, we care about this. Thank you, internet. Got you captured. You need to hold it's holding them accountable.
Yep, that
So I mean, it's
accountability.
putting that
Yeah.
pressure on, like, you made this promise, and you do it in the most professional way possible. But my point is that companies, leaders have recently said that they're going to commit to this, and you have to just remind them of it.
Yep.
And you have to choose your battles. You have to choose your
Yes.
battles. Yeah, you can't. I mean, you talked about like knowing yourself, and as we keep on saying, boundaries. You have to
Mhm.
decide which battle you're going to fight, because
Yep.
there's so much egregious, like racist,
Yeah.
systemic behavior in every industry, in every company, that you will lose yourself in fighting every battle. So you
Yep.
have to decide which one is the most important, like which hill am
Exactly.
I going to climb so that I can
Mhm.
get what I want. And I mean, this has to do with almost anything to me in like corporate culture. Like you only have so many times you can cash in your coins.
Yep.
Yeah, like you earn favor, and then you
Yeah.
get favor. Like it's a
Yep.
give and take. So you have to decide
Yeah.
which issues are the most important for you to cash those coins in, or you just,
Yep.
unfortunately, you're going to just seem hysterical,
Yeah.
and you're going to be exhausted.
Oh my
So that's just
gosh.
my take on it. Like we can have a
I
whole nother episode about this conversation,
I
clearly.
know. If I can riff off of that for a second though,
Go
I
ahead.
like you are just like speaking so many gems right now, because this is what I have been thinking about too. And like, I'm, you know, like so passionate about this too, because like you're right. I always say we have a finite amount of energy, right? And I think internally, and I'd be curious if anybody listening and you, like, if you resonate with this, but there have been moments where like I've felt like when I don't speak up, right? Like when I'm choosing which battle and I've decided, you know what, I'm not going to choose that battle today, where I felt so guilty about it. I felt like, man, like I have whatever, like privilege of being in that company or economic wise or brown wise, like whatever it is. Like, man, I should have used that to speak up. And I think I've had to like internally rework that narrative for myself. And so I don't know if this is helpful for anybody, but like the saying I've been really kind of ruminating on is I'm going to choose my peace. So
Ooh.
yeah, like so I like when I'm confronted with a situation and I'm like, what path am I going to go down? Am I going to go down this path of like pushing and, whatever it is? Or am I going to choose my peace today? And not to say this path isn't choosing peace. The peace might take a while to get to, but like really deciding, like you said, choosing your battles. And for me, it's choosing my peace. Like, and it's helped me feel less guilty, I think, because I know that in order for me to sustain myself, I have to also welcome peace into my life. It can't just be fighting all the time, right? And battling all the time. I have to be, like the saying, I have to fill my cup. I have to truly, though, be full. I have to truly be peaceful and embody these things to continue fighting, to continue speaking up, because those things are really depleting.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And when you work on your piece and your journey back to self, going back to your career safari title, you will know when it's time for you to speak up. It will be very
Yes.
clear, like, okay,
Yes.
this is a situation where I'm about to use my voice
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Definitely.
and
100%.
make some change, versus fighting every battle. You once you like take a step back and focus on you and your own triggers and your own trauma
Yeah.
and heal from that, you'll know that like as she said, you can't fight every battle.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That's so good. And knowing yourself, like that self-awareness piece is so critical. And I think that's what good leadership is, right? Like really being obsessed with like understanding yourself, right? And your triggers, your traumas, your quirks, like really knowing yourself so well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you left that role last year, right?
Yep. Yeah. Last year. Yep.
Now, did you take a break? Speaking of healing and wholeness and boundaries,
Yeah. Good question. I
because that was
did.
intense. That was
That
intense.
that was intense. Yes. I love that you asked this question. Absolutely. I took a break. And I can't remember how long the break was, maybe a few weeks, or a month. I can't remember, but it
Okay.
was like I had planned it in such a way where like financially I was good, like I was able to do it, thankfully. But I'm a huge fan. I'm not a fan of jumping from one thing to the next. I think like I deserved time off in between. Our lives are not about work. Like
No.
the work should not make up the totality of our lives. You are a whole person beyond your job or work or whatever it is. And rest, I actually was thinking about this last night. Like rest is a fundamental part of your humanness, of your wholeness, of you, and like honoring when you need rest. And like that is a beautiful thing. So I am a huge fan and I absolutely have taken time off after every like big job change. So yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear. Otherwise, we'll have to end this meeting and this would be no, just kidding. So from both of those experiences, the Super Bowl and then working as the public policy director, especially at a time like that, what do you think you learned the most?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like I've talked about this a little bit, but I'll expand on it. Again, it's coming back, like everything's full circle here today, but it's coming back to like the journey to myself, right? So I think what I've learned the most is about me. And so what I mean by that is like I have learned about myself, but more importantly, I've learned what I need. So, Super Bowl was such a heavy lift. It was exhausting in so many different ways and an amazing opportunity. But it taught me things about myself, it reignited my passion for that issue. And it brought so much new perspective to me, like just in terms of life, people's experiences and journeys and their stories. And it really like helped me get closer to knowing myself. The director role at Citizens League, one of the last projects I worked on there was a community first public safety commission for the city of St. Paul, and they were looking at alternative responses to 911 calls. So this was like a direct result of what had happened to George Floyd and, what was going on in our state, and the mayor really wanting to take time to look at like, how can we do work better? How can we free up resources? And that work was actually the most intense work I think I've done to date, because it was such a intense, heavy lift in a short amount of time. And again, it brought me back to myself and knowing like in me stepping into my leadership and knowing like intuitively when something should happen, or how to communicate something, or just again leading, right? Like leading in a space and in a hard time, and when to push and when to kind of step back to. And boundaries though, like I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from all of these experiences and through my entire career is like, in knowing myself, I need to know my boundaries and I need to know what I need, and checking in, right? Like oftentimes, especially in tough jobs like that, like I always had to ask myself, like, am I tired? Am I hungry? Or do I need a break? Like it's one of those basic things, right? But again, if I wasn't aware of myself, I wouldn't even be able to ask those questions and then meet my needs. And I think it's imperative when you're doing any heavy work to be able to check in and know yourself. So.
Oh, I have two directions I want to go in right now. Do you have a moment where you felt the most successful?
Yeah. I feel like there's been a few moments. I think since I was just talking about it, after the public safety work, the last work that I did there, I felt really successful because I felt like there was a tangible like next step that the city had and that they were going to do. And I felt like the impact we were making, not just like on the broad scale of the policies and the things that were going to be implemented, but the impact we had, that I think and I hope that we had, with the people that were a part of that process. I felt really so there's always room for improvement, and I think we spent a lot of time thinking about those things and really reflecting on that work. But I have to say that like the intentionality that we tried to bring and the way we tried to hold that space and honor what was happening, like the Derek Chauvin trial was happening during that time. The verdict was actually released while we were doing that work. And there were other things that were happening in the community. And I feel like we did our best to hold space. Of course, we could have done it better. And I know that there are ways of improving, but like, I felt like we did our best with the resources we had and what we knew in that moment. And I'm taking away so many lessons learned that I've been applying and that I'm excited to apply to any work that I do going forward. So that to me was success. It's when like, the product that you delivered and the impact that you had, but also the lessons that you're taking away are profound and are going to help you in the future. So
You seem like a natural born leader. Where did that come from?
thanks.
You do. Like wherever Amanda
Yeah.
goes, I'll go to. I trust where
Yeah.
she's going.
I appreciate you. That's a good question. I'm not sure I can pinpoint it totally, but I think, I would say looking back, again, like to childhood and stuff, and there's been moments in my life where I've had to step up as a leader that there wasn't really a choice for me in some ways, but that I've had to step up to show up for my family and really be there for them. And I think once that happens, like, and you're always thinking and, kind of looking out for your people, like, yeah, I think that's where that kind of has come from. And I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm committed to my growth, so I think that also helps too. Like I will never be done with this work, and I think that is leadership to me. That like I'm always going to be doing my work because I see my humanness, right? And it's imperfect. And I think that helps me step into being a leader. It's like recognizing that.
That's actually a really good transition. I know you're always thinking about what's next for you.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we expect from you in the future?
Ooh, I'm excited about a lot of different things. So, as you know, I recently relocated to Dallas. But when I was in Minnesota, I had co-founded In Sisterhood We Brunch as a space to bring together um, women of color, BIPOC women into a space to really support their journeys and build their social, political capital and just have fun. So I'm really passionate about intentional community building. And being in a new city, like in a new state, it's a perfect time to do that. So I've been playing around with ideas of what that can look like here. So be on the lookout as I'm thinking about what that could be. And then if I can put in a plug, I'm passionate about leadership development and coaching. And I'm with a firm right now as a contract coach. The firm is called The Vision Investment. So if liked what I was talking about, I would love to welcome in folks who are ready to kind of work with somebody to navigate their careers and kind of get to that next level. But that's something I'm really trying to hone in on, that practice. So,
and what's the name of the firm?
it's called The Vision Investment.
The Vision Investment. And I'll put that in her Career Safari profile on our website as well. How do I get an invitation to In Sisterhood We Brunch? I'm a sisterhood. I mean, I'm a sister-ish. And
oh, girl,
like
you have
brunch.
the invite. Yes, I can send you the info to. It's in Minnesota, unfortunately, not expanded yet, but
virtual. Do a virtual. I can make waffles and I can be there.
That's how we started. We started with a virtual brunch actually, and that's how it transformed into in person. So maybe we'll have to bring that back at some point. But
you're in Dallas, like you have to make it virtual. Please invite me.
I will. Everybody's invited at that point. Like,
so with that, you guys, you mentioned you all get together and just love all. It sounds like you're loving and nourishing one another in the moment.
Yes, exactly, and that is what that's about. That is why we created it too, and it really was like what we've been talking about, like the just kind of exhaustion we were all feeling with COVID and the racial kind of reckoning happening in the Twin Cities, and wanting to come together and have a space to just be with each other. So that's how the virtual brunch got started, and then we're able to kind of expand that and recognize like the need to be off of a screen and be in person. And just a beautiful energy and space to be in community. So yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sold. And if I'm ever in Minneapolis, I'll let you know.
Yes, definitely.
I want to go to something that you mentioned earlier in our interview, just because it's been toying in the back of my mind about just you were placed into some very heavy leadership roles. And as you said earlier in your career, you were in your 20s, but you talked about that there's leaders that believed in you. And I think, there's a lot of people out there that feel that they have earned the right to be promoted and placed in certain leadership roles. And I'm curious, here's my perspective, and you can knock it down or whatever. You will know when you're in a position where you're celebrated and not tolerated. And did you know that you had leaders that believed in you to that degree? Or were you surprised that they even were like, put Amanda in that position?
Um, so sorry, pause. My internet was like totally cutting out at that second, so I didn't hear the whole question.
Okay, I'll restate it then.
Okay, cool. My bad.
Nope, that's good. Thank you for
Yeah, because I was like, oh my gosh, it just like completely froze.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said earlier in our conversation. Just you mentioned how you were put into very high level roles so early in your career. And you intimated, and you actually, I think, outright said that I had people who believed in me. There's a lot of people who are listening that believe that they should be in leadership positions, and they're just not getting it yet. So what would be your advice for people who are in that role? Like, I could serve in that role in my county, but I'm hitting so many roadblocks and being promoted. Like, what would be your advice there?
Yeah. Good question. And so I'll say a couple of things. It wasn't, I would say, so there's one example, right? Like before I was in the anti-sex trafficking role, there was one person in particular that I didn't even know was like paying attention to my work that closely. And they weren't my direct supervisor, but they were the one that really were like, you should apply. And this person saw something in me, right? Like I knew that I was ready for the next kind of evolution of me and to step into. And I think oftentimes when we're not given the responsibility, it's hard to like really know what you're capable of when you don't have the room to flourish, right?
Yeah.
And I think inside of me, I was like, I'm ready for the next step. I'm ready for the next level, but I need to have the room to do that, right? And to be catapulted. So my advice with that is like, have several people around you. You may not know that they're paying attention, right? But you will know there are indicators, I feel like, as to whether or not somebody is seeing your like brilliance and your potential, or if they're seeing your limits and your incapabilities, right? Like, and there are subtle things that they'll say, or like, again, it's energy, right? Like you'll feel their energy and whether or not they're finding opportunities for you or encouraging you, or when you bring things to them, whether or not they are excited for you, or if they're not, or they're faking it, right? So like really pay attention to that and to the energy you're receiving. And make sure you don't just put all of your, right, the saying like don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Like really make sure that you are connecting with people across like titles, positions, whatever it is, right? In leadership, maybe not in perceived leadership, but like you never know where your next opportunity, your next promotion, your next anything is going to come from, right? And it's so relationship based, but like never write somebody off because they might not have a title that's fancy and whatever. again, make sure you just have good people that are supporting you, and that, again, you're very conscious of the energy that they're giving, and that you're receiving. So,
Yep. You just said a lot. You just imparted a lot of wisdom. And it doesn't have to be your direct supervisor.
yep,
There are people watching you all the time. Find the people who believe in you.
yes, yep,
And yeah, you might think it needs to be this linear path, but no, maybe you just don't know. So that was
just
great
don't know.
advice. Great advice. Is there any other final piece of advice that you have for women out there that are hearing your story and might be interested in doing what you're doing?
Yeah, if I can say two things, I would say be open. Like, I think we all have, like, sometimes we have a rigid plan or idea of what we want life to be like and look like. And if I would have stuck to that rigid plan, I don't think I'd ever be in that role at Hennepin County, or now in, like, PR and public affairs, doing really cool work. So be open to where kind of life guides you, but be prepared. Like, be prepared, work on yourself, learn, read, like, really pay so close attention to your daily habits and make sure you're nourishing yourself. And so make sure that preparation's happening, but be open to where life is trying to guide you. And then the mantra I've been having now is, like, really remembering my divinity, like that I am a divine being. And so when I'm right, like, when I'm walking into rooms or going into a tough conversation or whatever it is, like, I'm really thinking about, like, I am bringing the energy that I am already, my divine self. Like, um I'm already there, So if you're trying to find a promotion, like, act as you would as if you already had it. And that's what I think of as divinity, like your greatest self, your queen self, like however you want to term it, but make sure you remember that and, like, bring that to every situation that you can, because it will shine out. I guarantee it. Yeah.
Well, you have there's things that you've said in this interview that you have held me accountable to, and things I'm going to start actionizing, like, probably as soon as we disconnect. So thank you. Thank you, Amanda. That is our torchbearer for the month, Amanda Koonjbeharry. How can people get in touch with you, Amanda?
Yeah. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram too. Not super active on Facebook, but I think Instagram and LinkedIn are definitely the best ways. So
Thanks. And for more information on Career Safari and to read Amanda's career journey, visit us at www.thecareersafari.com. Come join our Torch community. Follow us on social media. Watch this episode on YouTube. If you're just listening, there's more stuff we get into in the actual YouTube channel. And until then, continue to pass the torch. Bye, everybody.